Welcome. We're so glad you could join us today from Templeton World Charity Foundation as we share with you our request for proposals for our initiative on listening and learning in a polarized world. I can see, there are quite a number of people here, so thanks for joining us, and more are joining by the minute, but we'll get started now. So I will stop screen sharing for a minute and just to tell you a little bit about the goal of this session. So we have an RFP, which I assume you've all seen because you're here now. And today, what we're hoping to do is to first give you an overview of the foundation and what we hope to see in the work that will be supported by this RFP. It's part of a larger initiative, so I'll describe that a bit and describe what we're looking for in the grant proposals and what we're not looking for. And then my colleagues at Templeton World Charity Foundation, I should add, my name is Eric Marshall. I'm Director of Programs in Discovery Science here at Templeton World Charity Foundation. And you'll be hearing from Virginia Cooper, who is working with me as a principal advisor in this initiative, as well as Kristen Eldon Wiley, who is a master of many things in terms of grants and is really leading us through the open science aspects of this initiative. So with that, I'll get started. We'll talk for a bit, but we're going to leave significant time at the end for questions. So please feel free while we're talking to add your questions to the button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A, and then we'll try to get through as many of them as possible at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll start screen sharing and give you an introduction and an overview of the RFP, and we'll talk a bit about the process, and then we'll break and have opportunity for discussion. So first of all, TWCF, that's Templeton World Charity Foundation. We're a philanthropy that has these core values at the heart of our identity that really drive where we're coming from. The foundation was begun by and founded by Sir John Templeton, who was quite visionary and set up what I've seen as somewhat of a unique foundation in the breadth and depth of our interests in seeing positive change in the world. We do this by seeking a global perspective. So you'll see that represented here in the RFP. We're really looking at geographic and cultural diversity, not only of the researchers, but also of the research and what is researched. We embrace differences. This is quite an open-minded endeavor, inviting collaboration and a radical embrace of others who think differently. So we can, after we go through the details, we can discuss how that is really manifest in this RFP. Our value is to make spiritual progress possible. We're really looking at, not only scientific truth, but the combination of truth, meaning, and purpose coming together as central to human progress. What we're hoping to do here is to be catalytic, to promote breakthrough discovery that redefine the frontier of human knowledge. You'll hopefully see that there are some things here where they may be a little different than what you're expecting, because we think like a startup. We like to cultivate bold and ambitious thinking, and with as little bureaucracy as needed. And you'll see how we've structured things. We're trying to encourage taking risks for greater rewards. And finally, in the end, we're trying to create positive impact for people. We're helping, our central strategy is to help people flourish in the world. So with that, I'll move into this particular initiative, Listening and Learning in a Polarized World, and this RFP, where we're in this initiative, we're looking to support research for new scientific discoveries that can help humans flourish in a world confronted with increasing polarization. So with that, I'll mention a few things that you'll see that are threads throughout our perspective. One is we appreciate that polarization is complex. You'll see that the definition that we put out for polarization that's of interest here is quite broad. We want you in your proposals to state your definition. What aspects, what perspective on polarization are you particularly focused on, and how do you define it? We believe that we're all focused on a goal, an ultimate goal of a world for flourishing for all, in the face of adversity and the real world. So and with polarization, we see that polarization can be a threat to flourishing when it leads to things like hate, distrust, dehumanization, violence, economic disruption. But we also believe that that polarization, difference of opinion, isn't necessarily bad. In fact, those with opposing views need to connect to solve some of our society's most pressing problems. And one view that really comes from our founder, who believed that we can get closer to the truth through friendly competition of ideas, is that there can be progress made from competition and through listening and learning. So in terms of our initiative and our funding, this RFP is really the first stage in what we're envisioning as a 3-stage funding process. So the first stage is to really understand the underlying mechanisms of polarization. And I'll explain a little bit more in the next slide, internal mechanisms of polarization and depolarization with clear and measurable indicators of these mechanisms. So I'll say more about that, because that's the heart of this RFP. But there's a structure in place, hopefully an overlapping connectivity of phases, where we will then fund researchers to go out and measure and map polarization between and within societies and cultures in a global context. What are the universals? What are the culturally dependent aspects? And where are people in relationship to these different measures, depending upon where they are and what culture they live in? And finally, we believe that this knowledge, and hopefully this progress in knowledge, will then inform culturally relevant polarization prevention and mitigation innovations to do this. So those 2 phases will be upcoming. And again, we're starting here. You're with us at the beginning, so happy that you're hearing this. We want to understand the underlying mechanisms and with related measurable indicators. So here's a model that we've put together. Hopefully this is useful, this diagram, to sort of demonstrate how we're thinking about what's in the box, what's out of the box, what's part of the system under that's being researched? How does it relate to what's outside the box? And what are we hoping for? What are the outputs of our research on what's in the box? So first of all, what's in the box? Well, individuals are at the heart of it. Polarization is all about people and their relationships. So we're looking at individuals, and I believe particularly with respect to their cognition, their emotions, their behavior, also their underlying biology and their role in social networks. That's what's in the box. Those should be the subjects of the studies. What are we hoping to study and support study of? Well, one are really clarifying and developing further models of the theories of the underlying internal mechanisms. The word internal here refers to what's inside the box, the individual, their biologies, and their role in social networks. So what are the models, the theories of these underlying internal mechanisms? That should be at the heart of the research that's being proposed. But it requires that it's also connected to what are the measurements, what are the indicators of these particular underlying internal mechanisms. So that's what we're hoping that this research will support. It's in the context of interaction. You'll see two-way arrows on both sides of this box of both polarizing and depolarizing external, that is, sociocultural forces. Those certainly are part of the models, but not at the heart of the models. Those are, and also, of course, the individuals, their biology networks are helping to create these forces as well as being affected by them. And depending upon what's going on in the elements in the box, you arrive at different polarization states. That's the arrow to the right. Arrow to the left is that, of course, individuals' biology and social networks are affected by the polarization states. So that defines sort of the scope and the system that we're hoping that the research will focus on. So in terms of the request for proposals, I think at this point, let's see, I'll mention that the request is open now. It's open through January 24th. Again, we're hoping, to support research that will present new scientific discoveries that then can be useful in helping humans flourish across the world, in a world that's confronted with increasing polarization. We're hoping we're seeking to fund up to 12 different projects that will advance the knowledge base for researchers seeking to measure and map polarization between and within societies and cultures. So, and again, just as a clarification on that statement, again, this research is on that fundamental, the basic research, the research base, and showing how it can be used for mapping, but not the extensive mapping to begin with. So let's see. So what are we looking for? Here are the elements we're looking for. We're looking for a literature review that situates the proposal in relationship to conceptual and empirical work. We also seek to generate, modify, we hope to either generate, modify, validate, or falsify one or more of the theoretical models of polarization through empirical work in two or more cultural contexts. And one thing to note here, mentioning empirical work, this doesn't exclude mixed method studies, but it has to include empirical work. And it needs to be a theoretical model that focuses on mechanisms of polarization at one of those three levels that we identified in that last diagram: biology, largely neuroscience, at the individual level, cognitive, affective, or behavioral, and also looking at the role of the individuals in social networks. We seek to identify, develop, or rigorously evaluate measures of the proposed mechanisms at play. So this is really key, and perhaps what's most challenging, we'll be interested to hear the response, but that this work is both looking at the theories, theoretical models, as well as the related mechanisms at play. Both have to be part of the proposal. And in the end, we're hoping that this research will begin to identify both universal and culturally specific mechanisms of polarization. As I mentioned earlier, you need to provide your working definition and scope of polarization that's relevant to the model and the measurements in the proposal. And really, we're hoping, that you're clear about what's, about understanding whether these models and measurements are specific to the specific type of polarization of interest or more generally applicable to polarization. And finally, and we'll talk about this more in the next section, you're required to, and this is important, you're required to utilize open research practices that are described in the application guidelines. And secondly, to agree to participate in a collaborative research network. Oh, and just on that, both the open science and collaborative research network are really meant to not only provide impetus for growth of the field by cross-connecting different perspectives and different disciplines, but also to help you in your work to perhaps see your research questions in a different way. So hence we're requiring both of these, open science and active participation in a collaborative research network. So before we get into the details, just mention a few things to clarify what we're not looking for. So we're not looking for work that exclusively looks at polarizing behavior without a strong integration of theory and measurement. Again, I mentioned that as perhaps the key challenge here is strong model, strong measurements that can then be applied in a broader context to do some global mapping. But it's got to have the integration of theory and measurement. What we're not looking for are proposals where the primary research objective is focused on a specific polarization issue. It needs to be targeted to achieve an integrated understanding of models and measurements. So while, of course, your work can be situated around a specific polarization issue, the primary lens needs to be focused on particular, on the fundamental understanding of models, not on the polarization specific to the issue at hand. And also, the primary focus of proposals should not be on the development of innovations or creating resources and platforms to spread awareness of innovations, although they may be a secondary goal. Indeed, eventually, that's the ultimate goal of all of this work. But the research we'll be supporting is on the models and measurements, not on the resources needed to create platforms and other resources or spreading awareness. Great. And then also, certainly, we're not looking for work or proposals that explicitly aim to promote one side of a polarized topic. We're interested in the understanding, not the promotion of a side of a topic. So with that, I will now stop screen sharing and pass on to my colleague, Virginia and Kristen.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Virginia, for sharing. Hi, everyone. As Eric mentioned earlier, Kristen, I am a senior program manager here at Templeton World Charity Foundation. And a part of my role in the foundation is to promote best practices in open science. As Eric also mentioned, that this is being run as a open and collaborative research call. So TWCF recognizes that an open and collaborative approach involving global interdisciplinary teams will achieve more reproducible and innovative outcomes. So we've structured this RFP as an open and collaborative funding call with 3 main goals. Our first goal is to, the reason for making this open and collaborative is to accelerate discovery. We believe that collaboration accelerates research outcomes and that open sharing of research outputs fuels collaboration. The exchange of ideas, especially across disciplines, improves the likelihood of higher quality results. We also want to increase equity. We take it seriously that world is in our middle name, and TWCF has embraced a global commitment to support projects wherever they can have the greatest impact. And it's crucial for this vision that the outputs of our projects that we fund are openly accessible to anyone with an internet connection, free of charge and regardless of affiliation. Finally, we also want to learn from this RFP. We've partnered with Rapid Science, who will be studying our experience, making this initiative an open and collaborative initiative. And from these lessons learned from this RFP, they'll be building a blueprint for other funders to make their own initiatives open and collaborative, but we'll also kind of hope to hone in and implement more best practices across our funding programs. Virginia, thank you. So there's a few key questions and processes in both the application stage and during the active grant that hone in this desire to make this an open and collaborative funding call and eventual funding cohort. In the application form, we will ask you questions on how you plan on sharing the research outputs. If the grant is successful, you will be required to share and make your journal publications, data sets, software, and applications and protocols open. So we'll expect this to be taken into account in any of your sharing plans. We will also want to hear about your experience engaging in open activities and collaborative projects. Lack of experience will not reduce your eligibility, but we want to hear that you're open, for lack of a better word, and receptive to these practices. Later in the down selection process, and we'll be very clear to let you know when exactly, we will make it required that you pre-register your research project. We will be here to work with you on this and support you in this process if you'd like extra support for pre-registering your project. During the active grant, as already mentioned, you'll be required to share certain research outputs, and we'll also be encouraging you to post your preprints. And to aid in collaboration, the pre-registration that you do for the project, as well as any planned or actual outputs, will be actively shared amongst the funding cohort. We'll also organize conversations and meetings with the group, and we'd expect that the funded grantees will actively participate in these conversations. Finally, and I think this is an important one, we expect you to let us know what your challenges are and kind of in these requests that we're making of you. We want to know what's working, what's not working, what you're having problems sharing, what you don't feel like should be shared, and kind of whether or not our guidelines and our support and our tools are really helping you. This is a learning process for TWCF in a way. We believe very strongly in the value of open and collaborative research, but how we support this and our grantees has not been completely ironed out. And we want to hear from you both during the application process and during the active grant about this. Like if there's any concerns or what's working, I'm just would really like to hear about them. I'm not a program lead in listening and learning initiatives. Virginia and Eric are the content people, but I expect to be very much involved in sort of this funding round to as kind of the lead in open science. And I would expect to work very closely with this group once they're funded as well. That's me.
All right, and so I will walk us through the RFP process, as well as give a demo of the registration portal and the application portal. So stage one is for us to issue the request for proposal and for the applicants to complete the proposal. That's the current state that we're in. It will be open until January 24th. The second stage, and I'll just go through it very quickly because I'll go into more detail later on, is just a completeness check and an internal review. The third stage is our external review and our partial lottery. And our fourth stage will be the response to reviews for our selected finalists, our funding decision, and our pre-registration. Okay, and so we'll go over to our portal registration. Kristen or Eric, can you just let me know if we're seeing the portal registration screen?
Yes, I can see it.
All right, great. So for those who have not yet registered, if you go and you click the link that you can find on our website, you will be brought to this portal registration page where we will require you to complete all of the information that's in bold. So that's your first name, last name, email, your organization information. So if it has a GuideStar profile lookup, you can automatically search for it here. So we can search and we'll see if the GuideStar database has the organization. You just click it there and it will fill in the information. If it's not, doesn't have a GuideStar information, you can put the organization information in yourself. Then you would go down to the bottom and insert your project title, proposed start date. All of them must start within 2023, the duration in months, which is a max of 24 months. And we ask you to insert your academic discipline, and this can be up to 3. Once you do that, you'll submit a request, and within a day or so, maybe less, a few hours, depending on who's online, you will get an email confirming your registration. Once you've had that, if you want to come back, you can actually submit a second one by refilling out this form, or if you came here by accident looking for the grantee portal, you can just click this link here, and it will take you to our portal. I do want to highlight that we talk about our RFP guidance document a lot because it's the best thing to help you and make sure that you get all of the requirements correct, and it's a complete support for everything. And so you find it here. It has it has a few appendices, so it tells us about the goals. It has the challenge statement. It walks you through anything you will need when you get into the application, into the actual application form I'm about to go over. So this is a great resource for you to have, and we developed it for your use. Most questions, if you cannot find the answer here, you can feel free to email us at LLPW@templetonworldcharity.org, and we will do our best to assist you. So we'll go into the application portal. So after you sign in, you will see something that looks like this. So, well, actually it looks like this. So this is the portal overview. Here in the corner, you will find this is the portal that you'll also use if you are awarded a grant. So it starts off with the people. At this point, it'll just be you as a registrant. You'll have your organizations. I want to highlight this in draft. If your organization is not one that's already registered with the foundation, you will need to actually submit your organization document. So we will remind you with prompts in the portal, but you have to make sure to remember to hit that submit document to make sure that your organization is submitted. Then the meat is we get to the drafts of the request. So once you get here, you want to go to the top here and click edit. This will allow you to see all of the instructions for the portal. So as you click and you go through all of these, we've included a lot of information to help you and walk you through how to fill out this form. We have a few dynamic forms attached to it. So if you go to an output, we have an option here for you to add your output. Loading. Okay, I think my internet's moving a little slow, but here, yes. So here you'd be able to put your output. So let's just put demo, and you'd be able to find your output category. Let's put a podcast, who your audience is, whether it be researchers or the general public. And then we would have description of the deliverables, the output quantity, and when you expect it to be done. Then you save it and it'll pop up here. As same thing happens with outcomes, team members, as well as additional organizations. And so we really want you to see, oh, and if something can't be blank, it'll let you know. This here is really important because this will be where our open science, open research information is needed and how you will share this output. Right? And so all of these would need to be saved. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of the portal. It's very straightforward. And like I said, the application guidance document, as well as this form, is pretty straightforward. So you can just hit save here if you want to save your work over the course of the time, or if you're done or you want to leave and come back, you can just hit save and close. And so this is, I guess, where you would probably have the most questions. Once you're done with everything, you want to hit submit. This is very important. And if you have not completed anything, you will get, as you will see, a bunch of errors asking you to complete sections. But once it's submitted, you can go back to requests over here and you will see where your submitted proposals are. So if you ever want to look and do a test to make sure that is submitted, if you log back out of the portal and log back in, it should be submitted. If it's still in drafts, that means it has not been submitted successfully. You will also get an email confirming that it has been submitted. And as you can see, you can submit multiple ideas. Right, and then we will go back to our webinar slides. Move on. So the first one, oh, excuse me. Sorry, that. Make sure start. Here we go. Yeah. So another part to talk about in stage one is our budget template. So this is one of the few forms that aren't dynamic. This will be an actual link on the page that you will have to download and complete and re-upload to the platform. And so here, these are our key sections that we need you to fill out. It'll be our project personnel. We have our narrative there. So as the instruction says, we would have to ensure that you give a good explanation of what the money is going to be spent on. You also want to look at the amount of funding as well as the project cost. Very important is our travel and lodging. We can only have in line 5 up to 10% of the budget be for travel and lodging. Second, the overhead percent can only be as up to 15%. We do not fund more than 15% overhead. And so those are two things about the budget that we will be looking for. Next, the stage 2 is the completeness check. So the completeness check is really just to give you, what we do is just to screen to make sure that the applications were actually submitted properly. All of this information, like I said, is found in the guidance document, but these are the things that we'll be looking for. We'll be making sure that the project description is completed, the budget is filled out correctly, that you have one entry in outputs, outcomes, team members with attached CV, and that the proposal has been submitted and confirmed, and that the applicant is a part of a research institution or university. We cannot give funding or grants to individuals. And we want to ensure that the project description is anonymized, which I'll explain a bit more in a minute. Stage 2 is where we get more in depth. So instead of it being just an initial screen, we will actually look more into the quality of the proposals. Here, we will look for compliance checks. We will check the project leader and project team just to make sure that they will be able to conduct the research that they said they would be doing, that the host institution is appropriate, that the budget is feasible, the budget is compliant, the project aligns with our donor intent, which if it responds to the challenge statement appropriately, it will be. Willingness to engage in open and collaborative research practices, and that entries include outputs with plans on how they will share, as well as respond to the challenge statement appropriately. Stage 3 is the external review. We have outsourced this to a group called AIBS, and they will secure reviewers for us based on the applicant pool. So we are going to make sure that the applicant pool matches the external reviewers, and these applicants we expect to come from globally diverse backgrounds, as well as the same backgrounds of the academic disciplines. And so they will be looking at the potential for impact, the innovation, the study design and methods, the overall quality, and there will be a conferral. So at the end, the reviewers will then have a chance to see their peer reviews, and they will be able to have a conferral period where they can discuss each other's reviews. And we do this because it's going to be double blind, and we want to make sure that we can be as fair and open as possible in terms of the peer review. And lastly, in stage 3, it will be a partial lottery. So one of the reasons why I want to be extremely fair is because the external review scores, from them above a cutoff, there'll be a random selection, and that's how we will select our finalists. Below the cutoff, will not move on to the next round. And then the 4th round is our pre-registration and funding decision. And so here, our finalists will be allowed to provide feedback based on what the reviewer said. They'll be able to, if they would like to, update their proposal form to strengthen it based on reviewer comments, critiques, and suggestions, or have an opportunity to refute the reviewer's comments if there was some type of misunderstanding. From then, the funding decision will be made by the trustees of TWCF. At this point, it's no longer competitive, and so all of the people that have made it this far will be presented before the board. Then after approval of these grants, there will be a requirement for pre-registration of the grants. We will have a separate webinar for the finalists to help them through the pre-registration process. And then finally, registration can be for hypothesis testing or exploratory research. Kristen spoke a bit about this, but we recommend osf.io. And like I said, we will have webinars to help us through this. And so this is the timeline. So this is our first webinar. We'll have a second webinar in January for last minute questions regarding submission. Our submission deadline is January 24th, 2023 at 12 midnight, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. The announcement of finalists will be made in mid to late April, and the announcement of the awards will be in late June. The earliest start date of these projects will be September 2023, and the project durations are expected to be between 12 and 24 months. If there are any questions as you go through the process, feel free to reach out to us at LLPW@templetonworldcharity.org. And that is our last slide. So I'm going to stop share and we're going to open it up for questions. I see that we have quite a few. All right, and so Eric.
Great. Thanks. So yeah, I guess first, I'll quickly go through some of the questions that we received in the Q&A that have been answered, and then we can discuss the unanswered ones that are open. So 12 have been answered so far. So thanks for your questions, and feel free to continue adding. I see they're coming in by the minute. So a logistical question, whether we're going to be sharing the slides. We will not, but the webinar is going to be recorded and it'll be available on our website. In terms of, let's see, the question came up, are we interested in, not interested in organizational, cross-organizational or institutional polarization mechanisms? So yeah, my response to that is that organizations and institutions are social networks. So social networks are in the box in relationship to individuals, because these social networks consist of nodes of individuals and their relationships. So if the mechanisms being studied consider these elements, individuals and their connections within these organizations and institutions, this could be of interest. Let's see. Next question is there, this is about our collaborative research network. And the question is there a TWCF specific collaborative research network that applicants should plan to integrate with, or can applicants also bring their own networks to this work? So I really appreciate that question. So, I look at networks as having a core, having rings around that core, satellites connected to the core and the rings. So with this initiative, we are going to support development of a core collaborative research network that consists of the fundees. But with that, we want to grow that and make connections. So making connections with rings or satellites of other networks or other networks of networks that are related is definitely on the horizon. And eventually, as you can see through our phased approach, the core objective, the ultimate objective of this is to connect research and practice. And we want great research, but we want it to be useful for practice. So we're hoping to also bring in, and we also encourage you in your own proposals to make these sorts of local connections or topic-specific connections between your research and practitioners, so that we have research that is informed by practice, and eventually, with researchers connected early on, there will be practice informed by good research. Another question. Is there a prerequisite for the type of measurement? So really the main prerequisite is that it has to be directly related to the theoretical model, and it must be relevant to cross-cultural studies. And we ask you to test it in at least 2 cultural contexts. Next question. I would appreciate more information about the focus on mechanisms. Asking, should proposals already define the mechanisms to be studied in measures, or could projects seek to identify unknown mechanisms in a given context around a set of particular or polarization issues? And is there a preference for the approach? So going back to the RFP, we are open to proposals that seek to generate, so it could generate or modify or validate or falsify one or more theoretical models of polarization through empirical work in 2 or more cultural contexts, and we don't have a bias towards which of those pathways is followed. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. One question, interested in hearing more about the scope of the new data collection in phase 1. Can the evaluation be primarily based on secondary analysis or in some new proof of concept work to establish rigor of the proposed mechanisms and model? So my initial response to that is, as long as the data is rigorous and it's directly related to the goals of this RFP, secondary analysis or even meta studies can be part of the mix. Next question, are models and measurements of depolarization equally of interest? That is, focused on models and measures assessing things like conflict resolution, peace building, peace education, and post-conflict context? And the answer to that is yes. We're interested in the mechanisms both of polarization and depolarization. That's a great question. This actually reminds me too, certainly, we're assuming you're all submitting proposals, but we we encourage you also to share this RFP with your colleagues, in areas that we may not have reached well yet, including some of the areas you just mentioned. So thank you for that. Yeah, and can organizations submit more than one application? Certainly, please do. Can you describe the relationship between the Templeton World Charity Foundation and the John Templeton Foundation? Well, both of these foundations were established by the same founder, Sir John Templeton. We have very similar missions and donor intent, but we are separately organized entities. And I believe, I know there was a question we received earlier, so we'll answer it here too, is that just because you're a grantee of one organization does not mean you cannot apply for funding from the other. A question about the start date. Start date in the guidance document says December 2022. Yes, thanks for catching that. That's certainly an error. We'll fix that. The earliest start date is September 1st, 2023. And the projects must start by December 31st, 2023. So yes, it's 2023, not 2022. The amount of $250,000 are for each project. Yes, this is the maximum amount, US dollars, 250,000. The request allowed for each proposal submitted, certainly in this phase, for this particular RFP. And also just a side note, that includes indirect costs, I believe up to 15%, if I remember right. So that's inclusive of any indirect cost you're adding rather than exclusive of it. Let's see, question, approximately when would you expect to have decisions on this call? Knowing this would help calibrate proposed start date. Well, the applicants should be informed if they're finalists by mid-April, mid to late April, and at the end of June, the finalists will be notified whether or not you're funded. And then the next answered question is this RFP by individuals or organizations? I work in a university as an administrator, and my background is a research-based degree. Would I have to register for any nonprofit organization, or can I work on human flourishing by staying in my current job? So the answer to this is that we grant to universities, nonprofits, other organizations. We cannot give grants directly to individuals. So typical format is there's a project director or project lead that's employed by the organization that the funds are granted to. So those are the answered questions. And let's see, I don't know, Virginia or Kristen, would you like to take some of the unanswered questions?
Eric, what you could do is you can go through some of the open questions, and Kristen and I can be typing as well. That way we can get through as many as possible in the last 10 minutes. I saw that there were a few around culture. So if you wanted to just discuss around cultural context, or how is culture defined? Is it by geography? There was a question about, could there be multiple cultures in one country? So I think that would be a good one to tackle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you might have noticed that we tried to choose our words carefully. So we talked about looking at cross-cultural differences both across and I believe within. So yes, the cultural context can be even within one geography as well as across geographies, if that is the question. Yeah, so yeah, I see one of the questions, does this necessarily imply 2 or more countries? But if you have 2 or more cultures within a country, that qualifies as well. Yeah, is interdisciplinary collaboration a must? That's an interesting question. I think the demands of this are so broad that it it's probably rare to find the expertise for both the theory and the modeling and the cross-cultural aspects all in one person. If you have that all, say, in one group, so it's really the interdisciplinary expertise. So if you can demonstrate that you have the expertise across the different aspects together in one institution, that could qualify. But certainly, the interdisciplinary aspect of this is part of the nature, the design of what we're seeking to do. Integrate. We want to integrate theory, measurement, and an eye towards cultural differences. So you need expertise for all of those aspects. Great. And so I see there have been some more that were answered. Let's see.
Eric, one that I've seen come up twice is about the lottery. I don't know if you want to go in a little bit more detail about that process.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. In fact, I think for the last few minutes, that's very helpful. And I can focus on the answering. So the lottery system, first of all, the purpose for including a partial lottery is that we really want to make sure, going back to some of the values we talked about, where we want to make sure that we don't just receive safe proposals put forth by very well-known and previously well-funded organizations. So we want to make sure that we're attempting to remove as much bias as we can. One, by blinding the external reviews, but also by then after these are ranked, taking the top number, but also using a partial lottery to, out of the top, randomly select which ones eventually get the funding. Because in our experience, once you get to the upper echelon after the review, the differences are often not extreme. So we want to make sure that again, we're removing some bias there by after we down select through the external review process, then applying a partial lottery to the top ranked proposals. Great. Let's see. I think we have just a few more minutes. Any other themes that you see coming up?
Sorry, I was also working on other ones.
Sure.
Either this RFP is based upon only framework with real-time data analysis or any ground level working on humanity as one that's come up. Any preference on early career researchers, or should the PI be a credentialed scientist?
Actually, that's an interesting question. Let's see. So yeah, so because certainly the team needs to be strong, in that I guess the question is, what does early career researcher mean as opposed to credentialed scientist? I mean, certainly we are very open to early career credentialed scientists that put forth a strong proposal and have the capacity to successfully carry out the work. And let's see. Yeah, there's a question about any guidelines or preferences regarding the multi-method strategies that will likely characterize the interdisciplinary research. No real preferences. Again, I think, with that one, again, different approaches, using mixed methods is fine, but there does need to be a strong empirical method aspect of the research, and that needs to tie the model to the measurements. Great. Let's see, and I'm looking back at the question. This is RFP based only on framework with real-time data analysis or any ground level working on humanity. I'm assuming that's also related to this question about whether it's quantitative or qualitative data, and certainly a mix. Qualitative data that informs and helps in understanding the quantitative is welcome, but you need to have a ground in quantitative data along with any qualitative ground level working that you do. Good. And I see, let's see, any others that perhaps were answered that we should answer before we break?
Yeah, there's a question about if the grantees of phase 1 will make up phase 2 or phase 3, or will there be more competitive processes for phase 2 and phase 3?
We have not yet developed the structure for the following phases. Certainly, we're hoping for some overlap if the grantees are different. So there will be a process to recruit the phase 2 and phase 3 grantees. There's certainly a possibility of being considered for multiple grants, and if you're chosen for one phase and not part of the next phase, we're expecting to have cross collaboration between the phases. We're hoping that we can set this up to stagger these phases a bit, so that there's a real community of learning and practice that's developed. Great. Well, with that, I see we've reached end of time, so I thank you all for being here. And again, if we didn't get to your question or answer it well enough, or you didn't get a chance to put it in the Q&A, feel free to send the questions to LLPW@templetonworldcharity.org. And we're eager to see your proposals, and we're here to help answer any questions you have along the way. So thank you very much for joining us.